Okay, so ready for a deep dive into something I think we're all pretty much obsessed with.
Let me guess. Weight loss.
You got it. And you've been digging into some really interesting perspectives on this from Czech fitness experts.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this really popular Czech fitness YouTube channel, and honestly, their approach is so refreshing. They're all about the science, no magic solutions.
Okay, I like the sound of that already.
Mm.
So no crazy diets or anything like that?
Nope. They keep it real,
Yeah.
they really hammer home this point that understanding calories is non-negotiable if you want to lose weight.
Right, calories, that whole calories in versus calories out thing.
Yeah.
We've all heard it a million times, but these experts actually make it click.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting? The way they break down how we burn calories. It's like 4 main pieces to the puzzle. So first up, you have your BMR, or basal metabolic rate. Basically, it's like the bare minimum energy our body needs just to function.
So even if we just laid around all day, we'd still be burning some calories.
Totally. Think of it like your body's engine just running in the background. And get this, that BMR, that's like 60 to 70% of the energy we burn daily.
Wow, okay, that's a lot. So what about the rest of the calorie burning puzzle?
Okay, so this is where it gets cool. They talk about NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And this isn't about hitting the gym or anything. It's about all those little movements we make throughout the day that actually add up way more than you think.
Okay, give me some examples. What counts as neat?
So, imagine tapping your foot in a meeting, or walking over to a colleague's desk instead of emailing them, or even just fidgeting while you watch TV. All of that is NEAT.
So even those tiny little movements can actually make a difference in how many calories we burn.
Big time. They actually talked about studies showing that NEAT levels can be different by as much as 2,000 calories per day between 2 adults, even if they're the same size.
Wait, 2,000 calories?
Yeah.
Seriously, so you're saying someone who's naturally fidgety or walks around more could eat a whole extra day's worth of food and still not gain weight?
Pretty much. It's crazy, right? It shows you how much those little movements really add up. And we haven't even talked about actual exercise yet.
Right, because there's still the gym rats and the marathon runners and all that.
Yeah.
So that's the next piece of this calorie puzzle. What do they call it? Exercise activity thermogenesis, or ET?
You got it. EAT is all about those dedicated workouts. But here's a reality check. Unless you're training like a pro athlete, ET usually only makes up about 5% of your daily calorie burn.
Wow, that's way less than I would have thought.
Mm-hmm.
I bet people totally overestimate how much they burn working out and don't realize how important NEAT is.
All the time. Okay, and then the very last piece of the calorie puzzle, this is the thermic effect of food, or TF. Basically, how much energy your body uses to digest and process the food you eat.
Oh, that's cool. So even just eating burns calories. I've also heard that some foods take more energy to process than others. Is that true?
100%. Like protein needs more energy to digest compared to carbs or fats.
So that's why those high-protein diets are supposed to be good for boosting your metabolism.
Exactly. It's not a magic solution by any means, but that little boost, along with everything else, can definitely help with weight management. Now, before we go any further with these calorie myths, how about we take a quick break?
Okay, so we've got our heads around this whole calories in versus calories out thing and how our bodies burn energy throughout the day. But these Czech fitness experts, they don't stop there. They tackle this myth that I'm sure we've all heard before, the whole slow metabolism thing.
Oh, yeah, it's like the go-to excuse, right?
Right. So is there actually any truth to it? Or is it just a convenient scapegoat?
Well, it's a little bit of both, to be honest. It is true that if you've been dieting for a long time, your metabolism can slow down a little, but it's often not as much as people think. And here's where it gets really interesting. A lot of that slowdown is actually because of decreases in NEAT, not because your metabolism is inherently sluggish.
Oh, interesting. So if you've been dieting and you hit a plateau, it might be because you're subconsciously moving less throughout the day.
Exactly. Our bodies are amazingly adaptable. Like when we eat less, our bodies are like, okay, got to conserve energy. So we might not fidget as much or walk around as much, all those things that contribute to NEAT.
Wow. So our bodies are kind of working against us in a way, trying to maintain that balance like a survival mechanism.
Exactly. This ties into how important it is to find movement that you genuinely enjoy. The research these experts were talking about, it suggests that if you enjoy your workouts, you're less likely to overeat later. Makes sense, right?
Totally. It's like if you're dreading that hour on the treadmill, you're way more likely to reward yourself with food later on.
Yeah.
But if you actually enjoy moving your body, it becomes less about earning your food and more about just feeling good.
Right. And another thing they debunked about the slow metabolism myth is this idea that some people are just genetically blessed with a higher metabolism. Of course, genetics do play a role, but they were saying that those differences are usually pretty small, maybe a couple of hundred calories at most.
So even if genetics gives some people a bit of an advantage, it's not the deciding factor for most of us.
Exactly. They actually mentioned this one study where they had people who swore they were only eating like 1,000 calories a day. But then when they tracked everything properly, it turned out they were eating closer to 2,000.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. It's amazing how much we can underestimate how much we're actually eating.
Yeah.
And I bet we overestimate how much we're burning, too. It's like we want those extra bites to be insignificant, but they add up so fast.
It's so true. Even for people who know a lot about nutrition, they even said that there are studies showing that even trained nutritionists underestimate their own calorie intake.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Wow. That really highlights why being honest with ourselves about what we're actually eating is so important. Like paying attention to portion sizes, reading food labels, maybe even keeping a food journal could be real game changers.
Huge. Being aware is key. But, it's important to remember that even though calories in versus calories out is like the basic framework, there are actual medical conditions that can affect weight loss. And these experts talked about that too.
Right, like hypothyroidism, where your thyroid gland isn't making enough hormones, and that can totally mess with your metabolism.
Yeah, and they made a point of saying that hypothyroidism isn't the weight loss villain people make it out to be.
So it's not like a life sentence for weight loss.
Not at all. It might make things a little tougher, but the research actually shows that on average, people with hypothyroidism are only about 5 kilos heavier than those without it. And once it's properly managed with medication, that difference usually disappears.
Okay, that's good to know. So it's manageable. They also talked about lipedema, which I'll admit I'm not as familiar with. What is that exactly?
So lipedema, it's a chronic condition, mostly affects women. Basically, it causes an abnormal buildup of fat cells, usually in the legs, but sometimes the arms too.
And that makes it harder to lose weight.
Yeah, it can lead to a lot of swelling, pain, makes losing weight, and even just exercising really tough.
It's got to be so frustrating, especially if you feel like you're doing all the right things. It's a good reminder that everyone's body is different. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to this stuff.
Absolutely. And this is where it's so important to work with healthcare professionals who can actually figure out what's going on and give you advice that's tailored to you. If you're struggling, don't hesitate to get some medical advice. There might be something else going on that you don't even realize.
It's true. Sometimes you get so caught up in counting calories that you kind of forget about the bigger picture, like you were saying. And these Czech experts, they left us with a really interesting question. They're like, how can understanding the science behind weight loss actually help us change our mindset and make changes that stick?
Right. It's like bridging that gap between knowing something and actually doing it. And one thing they talked about that really resonated with me was that whole idea of finding joy in movement, like not looking at exercise as punishment for what you ate.
Totally. I love that. It's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking, I have to work out. But if you actually enjoy it, it just becomes part of your life.
Exactly. And it's not just about movement. It's about our relationship with food, too. Like, tracking calories can be helpful, but it shouldn't be about being perfect or obsessing over every bite.
Right. It should be about being more aware of what you're eating so you can make better choices, not becoming a slave to the numbers.
100%. It's about learning to listen to your body, realizing when you're actually hungry and when you're full. And finding a way of eating that works for you long term, something that makes you feel good, both physically and mentally. It's all about progress, not perfection.
And remembering that it's a journey, not a sprint. The experts talked about that too, how important self-compassion is, especially when it comes to weight loss.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there are always going to be ups and downs. You might hit a plateau or even have setbacks. But the important thing is to look at those as opportunities to learn, not as failures. It's about being kind to yourself no matter what.
So basically focusing on being healthy and feeling good overall instead of just obsessing over what the scale says.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you and what makes you feel your best. And sometimes that means forgetting everything you thought you knew and looking at things from a different perspective, kind of like these Czech fitness experts have done.
You know what? This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening. I feel like I've learned so much, not just about the science behind it all, but also about finding a healthier and more sustainable way to approach my well-being.
It's been great chatting with you about all this. Hopefully everyone listening feels like they can take what they've learned and start making some positive changes.
Absolutely. A huge thank you to our expert for breaking it all down for us today. And to everyone tuning in, keep learning, keep exploring, and remember, you've got this. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.